Good evening. Welcome to another edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube. And tonight, I'm going to try to keep this video short by giving you some straight knowledge on the low informed voters and what the U.S. Department of Education deemed as a reclassification of certain degrees like architecture, nursing, social work as non professional degrees. Now, I've seen a number of women who are on the internet right now, and this is where the ignorance comes into play. They're saying that, oh, well, it is the president trying to derail all of the occupations that are mainly female centric. I shouldn't use female centric, mainly occupied by females. Now, just so you'll know, I'll give you the example nursing. Now, there are degrees up there when they talk about professional degrees. This all comes down to what you can borrow. That's it. See, a degree like history, English, humanities, those are technically non-professional degrees. Now, what you have to understand when it comes to the United States Department of Education, what they're looking at during the Trump administration is that you have a number of people that have taken out a large amount of money. Some don't finish the career or the curriculum, some do, and they utilize the financial aid money for something different. And I'm talking about if there is an overpayment. Well, the degrees, just so you'll know that they're talking about, are still professional degrees. What has happened, and I want you to listen to me very clearly, and I'm going to break it down on why these degrees are capped off. And I'm going to tell you how to get a degree, particularly in nursing, without paying a lot of money. See, it all comes down to when you go to school for certain degrees and you end up with debt, even when you get a job, you don't get a debt or you don't get a return on your investment. In other words, if you're going to school for nursing, and nursing is a great profession, there are a number of men who are nursing, physician's assistants, great professions. The bottom line is you don't need to spend money. Now, I also read, and I'm a civil engineer, a master of science in engineering. Has less weight than philosophy. Okay? Now, when you get into your doctor's degrees, and I'm talking about the doctor's degrees that aren't academic doctor's degrees, ones that have doctor of osteoporosis, doctor of dentistry, jurisprudence, doctor of education. Well, in order to get those degrees, you're going to spend more money. So let me break it down to you on what the situation is. A nursing degree, a social work degree, so you'll know, particularly a lot of you females, and don't listen to these ignorant females out there, okay? Women, one of the things that you have to stop doing is you got to stop listening to other women. Look, I go to school and I'm still going to school. Ladies, a lot of you end up with a lot of debt. and you can get a job, but you're going to be paying off your student loans forever. When you're going to school and you are majoring in psychology and you have to borrow $100,000 a year, by the time you finish, you might owe over $500,000 in loans. And there's no way you're going to pay that back. Okay. So let me tell you what's really going on so you have an understanding about your degree. Your degree is a professional degree. And here's why I say your degree is a professional degree. A professional degree is a curriculum that you take certain courses, and those certain courses or academic coursework that you are studying is on what you call your licensing exams. Listen to me closely. A professional degree is a degree in which you're going to need a license. Let me give you an example. I am a civil engineer by degree. Technically, in the field of civil engineering, a master's degree, the reason why a master's degree in engineering is not professional, it's because on the undergraduate level, you only need a 4-year degree from an ABET accredited program to sit for your FE and your PE examination. So therefore, in actuality, you don't need a master's degree. Now, the only time you go back to get a master's degree is do what I did when you go to school for engineering technology. But outside of that, you don't need a master's degree. You don't even need a doctorate degree unless you're going to go into teaching. So when it comes to your degree in nursing, here's what you can do. Very simple. My mom is a registered nurse, and she went to Howard Community College in Columbia because I'm originally from Columbia, Maryland. Now, what she did, now back in the days, this was back in 1977. My mom was 36 years old. She went to Howard Community College. It's a 2-year degree. Got a 2-year degree in nursing. And then she was able to sit for the state boards. But guess what? She didn't have to spend a lot of money. She then went and finished up 2 more years to get a BSN, but she was already a nurse, an RN. So she got the same RN for less than somebody going to a 4-year college. So what I'm saying, like psychology. Now, of course, psychology, you're going to need a master's and probably a doctorate, but even in psychology, you can get a license. Now, what I'm really telling you all is the amount of money that you're spending to get degrees and you're not getting licensed, they're capping off the amount of money that you can borrow, so it can help bring the cost of tuition down. Because when you have to take so much financial aid out, it raises the cost to go to college for a lot of students, and college is incredibly high. Now, again, when it comes to your degree is a professional degree. They just capped off because during the Biden administration, he had these loan replacement programs. Well, he wasn't getting all of the money that you borrowed repaid quickly. Might be $10,000. And if you took out $200,000 worth of loans and you only pay back $10,000, that's doing no good for you. All right, let's go into let's see what I can do. Share some information. Now, I'm going to go in myth versus fact for the definition of professional degrees. Let's check it out. Okay, Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act placed common sense limits on federal student loans for graduate degrees. These loan limits will help drive down the cost of graduate programs and reduce the debt students have to take out. Graduate students receive more than half of their new federal student loans originated in recent years, and graduate student loans now make up half of the outstanding $1.7 trillion of federal student loans as a portfolio. So basically, under the act, the agency is required to identify professional degree programs that will be eligible. Listen to this, that will be eligible for higher federal lending limits. That's what they're talking about. They're talking about lending limits. It didn't say anything about your degree not being a professional degree. You just can't take out more money than you have previously taken out for your degree, your undergraduate degree. Now, a negotiating committee convened by the agency has proposed a consensus definition that designates medicine. That's MD, if you want to be a doctor, dentistry, DDS, law, and several other high cost programs is eligible for a $200,000 borrowing limit. That's because when you're going into medical and law, they do require a lot more schooling. So basically, students who pursue a degree in other graduate or doctoral programs would be capped at $100,000 in federal loans. Let's say me as an engineer, I want to go get a doctorate in engineering. Well, I can't borrow any more than $100,000. It did not state that my degree was a non-professional degree. What they should have done was emphasize federal lending limits. They shouldn't have used the word professional, although they should have defined a profession as a field where you need licensure. That's really what a profession is. So, undergraduate students are generally not affected by the new lending limits. Did you hear that? Undergraduate students are generally not affected by the new lending limits. Now, of course, you have a lot of dumbasses who are progressives who have been fear mongering about the Department of Education supposedly excluding nursing degrees from being eligible for graduate student loans. That is misinformation. The fact sheet sets the record straight regarding the proposed treatment of nursing programs under new lending limits established by the acts. Again, this is all dealing with acts. That's it. So they're saying the Trump administration does not view nurses as professionals because they are not classified as a professional degree. That's right. And anybody who sits there and says, well, these are all female professions, tell them they're full of bullshit. I mean, I'm a civil engineer, and my program is capped off at around $100,000. Now, I will tell you this, if you were smart, you can eliminate all that bullshit when you go to college by going to a community college. And this is what I tell engineering majors. If you want to get through the calculus, the physics, you go get you a 2-year degree, an AS degree in engineering. It's a transferable degree where you take all of your math and all your required thermodynamics, your engineering classes in your freshman and sophomore years. And I'll tell you why. In the bigger colleges, now I'm going to say this about engineering. You know what they do in those classes like physics? I went to University of Maryland. And in my physics classes, they're weed out classes. You don't see the professor too much. The professor has a microphone and a big auditorium of 400 students. The individuals who generally give you all the labs and the tests are TAs, teaching assistants. Basically, the teaching assistants are all graduate students. Some of them are pursuing a doctorate degree. Now, the fact is the definition of a professional degree is an internal definition used by the Department of Education to distinguish among programs that qualify for higher loan limits, not a value judgment. Notice they're putting value and loan limits. And see, individuals, this is what I'm talking about, dumb voters, dumb people. The term professional is not based on the value of your degree. Nursing is always going to be a professional degree because just like engineering, you have to be licensed. You are dealing with the public. So there's no way that nursing is not a professional degree. It's that I'm going to repeat it in this video over and over and over and over again until people get it. The loan amounts are capped. That's it. The degree is not devalued by the importance of the program. So it has no bearing on whether a program is professional in nature or not. Same as architecture. Okay. Architecture degrees. You have what they call a BArch, a Bachelor of Science in Architecture, and an MArch. Now, generally the difference between a BArch and a Bachelor of Science in Architecture is the amount of years you spend in school. For a BArch, because I know architecture was on that list. Well, if you spend 5 years in architecture, architecture is basically the art version of an engineering degree with less math. Well, for a Bachelor of Architecture, you can sit down and take the RE or RA examination. In other words, the value of an architecture degree, it is still professional because you have to be licensed to be an architect. And see, you have to understand that individuals getting their little fifis out there and they're looking at, oh, well, these are all female dominated. Shut that bullshit up. Female dominated. And this is what a lot of dumb women are saying. And this video is not hateful, but you got too many people out here listening to the ignorance. Bottom line is, what I'm doing in this video, I'm waking you up. I've been to college. I still take college classes. And I'm just telling you that even though your degree is on this list, now, if there's something on this list like sociology, or you don't need a license, but you're just going to school and you're getting humanities, you're getting those types of degrees, well, those degrees don't amount to anything. I will devalue those degrees unless you go get a Master of Education and you want to teach outside, or if you want to go to law school. Those are the only times that those degrees would have some value. But if you're just going to school to get a social science degree, not going to do anything for you. Here's another myth. Nurses will have a harder time securing federal student loans for their programs, and this would contribute to the nationwide nursing shortage. More BS. Not true. Nursing is always in demand. That's why nursing right now, you can go get a 2-year degree from a community college. I live here in Indiana, and you have a number of individuals who are in the nursing program at Ivy Tech. Some of them didn't go to IU. They might be working at IU. You don't even know if they have a BSN. They don't tell you, but there are a number of RNs in the IU system. And I guarantee, and I know most of them here in Indiana, because Indiana only has basically one community college, and that is Ivy Tech Community College. And they have a pretty good nursing program. Well, you spend less money. And if people are looking at the fact that, oh, well, you're a nurse and you don't have a bachelor's degree, that's petty. Bottom line, if a nursing student or if a nurse who's an RN has a Bachelor of Science in Nursing, and then you have another RN with an Associate Science in Nursing, but this person with the Associate is an RN, just like the Bachelor of Science person is an RN, well, the one that has the BS degree seems like they have an issue because they had more education or they spent more money. But an RN is an RN. And it looks like, again, the one with the bachelor seems to be inferior or jealous of the one who didn't have to spend or this basically said, I'm not going to spend a lot of money. But here's the fact. The Department of Education data indicates that 95% of nursing students borrow below the annual loan limit and therefore are not affected by new caps. Now, this is all. I'm getting this information from the United States Department of Education. That's where I'm getting all this information. So 95%. So if you're a nursing student and you know that your field is in demand, what are you crying for? If your field is in demand, you don't have to spend a lot of money for higher level degrees. Again, the value of your degree hasn't changed as a nurse. So further, placing a cap on loans will push the remaining graduate nursing programs to reduce their program costs, ensuring that nurses will not be saddled with unmanageable student loan debt. Too many individuals, and the reason why women might believe that this act is against women, well, you have more women who go to school and more women graduate with debt because no more women just don't know how to spend money correctly. They're running around, I'm educated, and you're broke. That's the problem. Also, it is important to remember that the loan limits are limited to graduate programs and have no impact on undergraduate nursing programs, including a 4-year Bachelor of Science in Nursing degrees and 2-year associate's degrees in nursing. Again, something that people don't pay attention to is 80% of the nursing workforce does not have a graduate degree. Why? You don't need it. You know, it's funny. Nursing is just like engineering because the reason why you don't need a graduate degree in nursing is because you already have enough time, have enough classes. You're already sitting for your state boards. And if you're working in a hospital, you're already getting a return on investment when you don't spend a lot of money. It's just that number of women have, particularly in the Black woman sector bragged about how educated they are, but never tell you how much debt that they have. And in the end, when you are saddled with debt, I don't care how much education you have. You had enough education to in school to study an easy curriculum, but you're saddled with debt. So basically, and this is myth. I'm reading myths and facts here. The myth, the Department of Education made this decision due to exclude nurses unilaterally. No, they didn't. The fact is, the department solicited feedback from the public and hosted a negotiated rulemaking community, which included a broad range of higher education stakeholders to regulate on changes to loan limits included in the act. The public will have another opportunity to weigh in on this issue as the department finalizes the rule early next year. So basically, the rule isn't even in place yet. But see, when you are low information and ignorant and don't read, this is what happens. You believe everything you hear. And again, when I get into the voting, this is why we have the issue now. Because you have a number of individuals who believe anything. And it's funny, it's the weak minded in this country who are setting everybody back. Why? Well, number one, to prove their argument right, they're going to read sources that are very biased, and that bias is going to be what they believe in, not necessarily right. Now, like I said before, the Department of Education has not published a proposed or final rule defining professional student yet. Now, we used to define professional student as one who's always staying in school trying to collect that financial aid, and they're not setting out to get a job. They're taking the monies that are extra once the tuition is paid. They're using that financial aid money for their lifestyle, and a number of students are. I know I went to Temple University in Philadelphia, and that's what a number of the students did. Now, because the negotiated rulemaking committee unanimously agreed to a proposed definition for professional student for increased loan limits, among other things, the department is required to publish the agreed upon language in its proposed rule. But the department has not prejudged the rulemaking process and may make changes in response to public comments. Myth. Because of these changes, the price of tuition will go up. Well, fact. Since 2007, graduate and professional students have been able to borrow up to the full cost of attendance. This has allowed colleges and universities to dramatically increase tuition rates, even for credentials with modest earning potential, which has saddled too many borrowers with debt that they find difficult to repay. The Act's annual federal loan caps already reining in inflated prices at graduate programs around the country. Bottom line, when you don't read, now I'm not going to go into the Newsweek. The reason why I'm not going to go into Newsweek, because Newsweek is very, very biased. Newsweek believes in the left wing ideology. Now, let me find something else. Let's go to Common Edge. We're dealing with architects, and I just mentioned architects. At one time, I wanted to be an architect. So the U.S. Department of Education recently announced that the professional status of terminal architecture programs is to be eliminated as of June or as of July 2026. This action could have significant impact on architecture students enrolled in professional degree programs, also known as terminal degrees, as they are required in many states to qualify for licensing exams, who receive federally backed loans. That's federally backed loans from the Department of Education. Now, the decision regarding architects' status as a profession primarily affects, again, student loan programs. It doesn't appear to have an effect on architectural registration and licensing. The U.S. Department of Labor continues to classify, and I just said it, architecture as a professional occupation and compiling labor statistics. Folks, you got to wake up and stop reading the bullshit that you hear and stop listening to these progressives and these individuals who are in their feelings, because they are sending you disinformation, misinformation, and they're utilizing a lot of fear mongering. Now, getting back to architecture, the DOE action is focused not just on architects, as several other occupations will be deleted or delisted as well. Among them, I've already went over nursing, but they have physician assistants, physical therapists, audiologists, accountants, educators, and social workers. And again, those are professions that require a lesson, a license. Well, you're going to have lessons that you need to take to get your license. So again, some of the other professions outside of architecture, you're going to have nursing, physician assistants, physical therapists, audiologists, accountants, educators, and social workers. That's again for loan capping. That is not for the value, because they are still professional degrees that you need a license because you are dealing with the public. So, according to the DOE, the crux of this action is student debt. The administration's One Big Beautiful Bill Act, passed by Congress and signed into the law this past July, placed new limits on federal student loans for graduate degree programs, which, according to the DOE, account for, again, half of the $1.7 trillion in federal student loans. The department is charged with identifying professional degree programs that will be eligible for higher federal lending limits. This is according to the DOE website. Now, again, a negotiating committee convened by the agency has proposed a consensus definition that designates, and I just read this before, so you're going to hear it again: medicine, MD, dentistry, DDS, DMD, law, LLB, and JD, and several other high cost programs is eligible for $200,000. And that's a borrowing limit. Students who basically pursue a degree in other graduate, and that includes my field, engineering. Engineering is still a profession, but you're not going to be capped off at $200,000. You're going to get $100,000. Again, both professional and non-professional degree programs have new caps, which potentially cuts financial aid for all students. Well, I'm going to tell you this too about college tuition, so you'll know. Now, I know it's probably harder for individuals who don't have a job. And I'm talking about the individuals who are young. Now, I'm going to tell you this. I know some of you want the college experience. Certainly, it is nice. But sometimes you can't afford that college experience. Now, you can get this college experience in your junior and senior year if you go get a 2-year degree. Now, I say this because, for the most part, And I'm just going to put engineering out there. Many individuals after their first year, because engineering is very hard, they try to weed you out anyway, particularly at these big schools. Students are out of engineering. But the way to cut off that is a community college. So let me move on. Under the DOE's new repayment assistance programs, loans for new borrowers will have an annual cap of $20,500 for graduate students, while loans to professional studies will be capped at $50,000. Any students in professional graduate architecture programs will need to find other sources for loans to cover the difference. Prior to this change, loan amounts could cover the full cost of degree programs. Now, it should be obvious, but many of the occupations delisted don't have the earning power of medicine, dentistry, and law. The DOE points out that reducing loan caps for students seeking degrees for these lower earning professions would reduce an unmanageable student debt burden, but certainly not if students must seek out non-federal loan programs with higher interest rates. The result could mean fewer students from non-affluent backgrounds entering the architecture profession. Now, of course, got the fee, people hurt. The reaction of architecture organizations to the DOE's delisting of architecture has been swift. The AIA, which is the American Institute of Architects, stated that it strongly opposes any proposal or policy which fails to recognize architects as professionals. That's not what it said, though. See, you get people in these organizations who don't read a fucking thing. They don't know what they're talking about. This is what gets me. You've got too many stupid people out there. Architecture is a profession because it requires a license. It doesn't mean that you need to take out $50,000 a semester to be an architect. You don't have to go to Harvard, MIT to get an architecture degree. All you have to do is go to a school that you can take out up to $20,500. And you know what? I realize that you think about this. You're a 4-year architecture student, and you go take out $20,500. Well, you know what? To me, that's a lot of money too, because when you this is what nobody's telling you. So if you go to a B-Arch program, which is generally a 5-year architecture program, guess what? You take out $20,500, you're still roughly around $125,000. And architects, unless you get your ARA or your RA and own the firm, you're going to find yourself in debt. But see, this organization is looking at the fact that, because they probably don't like Donald Trump in this administration, they're looking at the profession or the value of the profession rather than the lending for the professional degree in school. Again, you have to sort all this out. Now, again, the AIA points out that the legal designation of a RA, which is a registered architecture, it's a registered architect, that's your license, is earned through years of rigorous education, extensive professional examinations, and a demanding licensing process. Well, so is engineering. In fact, as an engineer, we got to go through 2 exams. And we don't take out that much money. So now to classify otherwise dismisses the expertise, professional standards, and the dedication that define the profession. Lowering the loan cap will reduce the number of architects who can afford to pursue this professional degree and harm leadership in this field. The AIE expressed the Institute's desire to engage with policymakers to ensure that the essential role and professional standing of architects are fully recognized in federal policy. The ARA remains steadfast in their commitment to protecting the integrity and value of the architectural profession. Well, what they're not saying is how many students, too, and here's what's not being said as well. How many students don't make it through the program? So you go out and borrow money, because I know when I went to Temple University, and I know architecture is a grueling program. Over the Thanksgiving break, you had students still, because I was on 12th Street in the engineering building, the architects were on the top floor at Temple University. They were burning that midnight oil, had their popsicle sticks, making models, taking exams. Yes, architecture is a grueling field because of the amount of design you have to do. Now, it's not as math intensive as engineering, but it is very intensive. So, as I go back, I just want to say, architects, you do a good job. You are not being devalued as a profession, just like the nurses. They're just lowering the cap. And let me tell you this, you're not excluding too many students as an architect, because when you get into architects, before you even get into your second year, you have to be able to make it through the first year of your design. And the first year is the weed out process. And I know not everybody makes it. And their designs are critiqued. And it's not just architecture, interior design, anything that deals with art. So basically, I'm just going to say this, and this is from Common Edge, the Association of Collegiate Schools of Architecture, the professional body that represents some 7,000 architectural educators and 40,000 architecture students, notes that the DOE's actions will limit access to student loans, according to ACSA President Jose L.S. Gamez. On a statement to the Architects newspaper, Gamez said, architecture has long been understood to be a profession built upon rigorous education, licensure requirements, and lifelong learning that prepares architects for responsibilities of protecting the health, safety, and welfare, not only of their clients, but of the public at large. The ACSA's position is that the DOE's proposed changes will stifle educational opportunities for would-be architects and risk our collective public interest. So the ASCE will advocate for a more considered approach to the needs of the public and reaffirm the importance of professional programs in architecture and design. Now, also, if you just heard me, really hasn't even been a rule on that. And right now, if you are an architecture student right now, it's not affecting you. Affecting individuals who will be coming in to an architecture school in the fall of 2026. In fact, like I said, I know out here a good architecture school. I know Indiana State, or IU has an architecture program, and I know not everybody. IU is a tough school. I know not everybody gets to that program. But again, you have all these crybabies out, and that's basically what's going on. You got too many crybabies who don't understand what's going on, and they don't care what's going on. They don't like this administration. They don't like the common sense. So basically, as I move on, Ed Marley, president of the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards, the boards that grant architectural licenses to the states, that's architectural licenses to the states, points out the advanced knowledge and skills necessary to provide competent architectural services, reinforces it as a profession that serves the public's interest. I just said that. See, they have, what it is these groups have loan amount and value intertwined with one another. Nobody is devalued nursing. Nobody's devalued architecture. Again, common sense, it is loan amounts you can borrow. Says Marley notes that the NCARB advocates for multiple paths to architecture. The council acknowledges that higher education is the most common path to licensure. Limiting federal assistance for students enrolled in architecture programs will impede access for many who desire to serve the public interest by delivering a built environment that improves our physical and mental well-being. Shrinking educational access will do a great disservice to current public interest and to further generations desiring to be architects. No, the way they can do this, open it up to the community colleges. You see, from what I know, when it comes to architecture programs, you got to go through a portfolio. That's what I know. And I know Purdue has a architecture program. I know that Purdue Fort Wayne has an architecture program or an interior design program, which is basically interior architecture. The bottom line is you have a lot of people, again, I'm just giving it to you from a common sense perspective. College costs a lot of money. And if you're going for business administration, because you have a number of people borrowing for degrees that aren't even business administration, well, what does that mean for business majors? Their tuition goes up as well. So the more borrowing you do, the higher the tuition costs are for college. So when asked, former University of Minnesota architecture Dean Thomas Fisher for his perspective on DOE actions, he saw it as a product of economic fundamentalism. The belief that the marketplace, rather than the experts with knowledge of these disciplines, should determine the value of their degrees. No, they're not determining the value of the degrees. They're determining the loan amounts you get for the degrees. See, people who's writing this stuff. Now, limiting the amount of money on students to basically what they can borrow for their education makes it more difficult. Fisher contends for less affluent students in need of loans to enter the field at a time when the demand for most of them has never been higher. It should also remind us of why we have professional education at all. Letting the marketplace decide what a professional should know will likely end up endangering a lot of people, as what happened in the past before we had professional schools. Let the buyer beware. Again, this is where you have a number. This is where you have a number of nincompoops out here. Let's go to the public health. What are they saying? And I'm putting all this out here. Last week, the Department of Education is reimagining and improving student education. That's RISE. That's the committee. That is the RISE committee. That's the reimagining and improvement student education committee. Reached preliminary consensus on a proposed definition of professional degree programs under the Big Beautiful Bill Act. Says we are deeply concerned and profoundly disappointed that the proposal excludes public health programs as well as several other health professions. This exclusion sends an alarming signal about the understanding of the public health workforce and risks undermining the nation's ability to prepare practitioners who protect and promote the health of all populations at a time when threats to public health are escalating. Leaving out the very degrees that train our frontline leaders is both short sighted and dangerous. The Department of Education is expected to issue a notice of proposed rulemaking in the coming weeks, which will open a 30-day public comment period. So, ASPPH will continue to advocate vigorously for the inclusion of public health degrees and will encourage all institutions to send comments as well. We will keep the community updated as developments unfold. And again, this is what people don't know. They're looking at everything from speculation. Now, to me, you should get loan amounts cut. This is what I'm talking about. People going to school, they're whining about what they're not getting. Now, implications for schools and programs of public health. Well, this decision last week has significant implications for schools and programs for public health, excluding the Master of Public Health and Doctor of Public Health from the professional degree category could restrict students' access to higher federal loan. And this is where the hypocrisy is taking place. See, on one hand, they say value. On the other hand, they actually tell the truth. So it's not the value, it's the amount you can borrow. Access to federal loan limits, higher federal loan limits, making public education less financially attainable and potentially weakening the future workforce pipeline. The proposal also overlooks decades of proceeding, recognizing the degrees as professional credentials essential to protecting community health and advancing health equity. As mentioned, ASPPH, but that is the Association of Schools and Programs of Public Health. They will continue to advocate for policies beneficial to public health. So far, I went over public health, nursing, and architecture. And what I have found is a bunch of whining. Now, of course, there is going to be some exceptions to rule. There's going to be individuals who aren't affluent enough. Well, let me break that down. Who have low incomes. Well, are those low income people really thinking about going to college anyway? Are they? Some of them are and some of them aren't. How long do they stay in college? We don't know. Let's find some other information out here. We're going to go to CPAs. Well, there's a recent initiative by the Department of Education to revise the parameters used to classify degrees within the professions category. Again, the potential change, well, I just read it, talks about nursing, talks about accounting. Basically, again, I just want to say this. Your degree is not being devalued. It's the loan amounts. And that brings me to the voters. Now, you have a number of people who go out and vote. Now, you have a special election in Tennessee today from a radical leftist, and I don't know her name, in Tennessee. It's Marsha Blackburn's state. Hopefully, she's out there campaigning for the Republican. Republicans, I'm just going to say this. You have a lot of dummies out there. And when people to me say they're independent, the independent voters are generally the stupid voters. what the independents, they talk about MAGA. Well, they're not MAGA. The problem is when it comes to voting in this country, we have to hinge on the 20% who don't know what they're voting for. But you even have a lot of low income voters or informed voters on both sides. Many people vote with their emotions. And in the end, they're voting for something that they don't understand, like socialism. Well, first of all, socialism doesn't help an economy grow. Now, are there dishonesties in capitalism? Yes, there are. But capitalism shows ownership. You don't go through a government entity to redistribute the resources. Life, I hate to say, is not about being fair because it's never fair. Life is about being able to make it. Now, what I believe is if you are having tough times, you deserve some help. But that help shouldn't allow you to be on the system for the rest of your life. Now, I know that certain generations, as we talk about the Gen Xers, we talk about the Gen Zers, every generation has had its issues. Every generation. But what I see voting now, you have a lot of misinformation. We had a lot of high prices during the Biden administration, high inflation. Now Trump gets in, he hasn't even been in a year. And these individuals expect Trump to wave a magic wand to reduce everything, even when he hadn't been in a year. Now gas prices are going down. I saw some places in Oklahoma City where it was $1.94. Here in Indiana, gas is from $2.59 to $2.99. I know in Tennessee it's $2.49. So gas is going down. Eggs are going down. And if you're having problems with eggs, maybe you shouldn't buy eggs. How often do you eat eggs? The bottom line is you have too many people who are in their feelings when it comes to politics. They don't know what's going on. They have these senseless arguments when they get on CNN, and in the end, they don't make any sense. And my fear right now is you have a number of people who voted for Trump because Trump wanted deportation. They're doing that. They wanted law enforcement, but now you have people who don't want law enforcement. Now things are too high. Well, the interest rate's not 5.3 like it was when Biden was in it, it's lower than that. Now, do we know if the tariffs are working? We don't. But I know that there's this talk about Trump giving $2,000 checks out. And that's based on the tariff money. Now, if he does that, I bet you the Democrats still won't vote for Trump. See, the mentality in this country is you have individuals, they don't want anything out of life. They want to be given something. Now, I know there are some things that are very difficult to handle, and there are some things that aren't. But I see a rash of stupid people. They want a system that they think is fair. Let me tell you something. If the billionaires who are the 1% don't pay taxes, who's going to pay the taxes? It's the rest of us, not the billionaires. They have a bunch of tax shelters, and it is not many billionaires out there. In fact, most of the people in this country are probably your $20,000 to $100,000 earners. That's where really the bulk of the taxes are, because we have to pay taxes. But for the individuals out there who are screaming that we need socialism, first of all, most people don't even know what socialism is. Healthcare, everything is high right now. But what's going on? You got to give it some time. I mean, they may even go back and work things off with the big, beautiful bill. And what I'm saying is, you guys down in Tennessee, you don't want to put this radical woman in there because you got to remember, as Republicans, you only had a thin margin in the House. And you don't want Hakeem Jeffries becoming the House Majority Leader or the Speaker of the House before the midterms. Because everything Trump put into place is going to go right down the drain. Now, of course, the Republicans have the Senate. But the bottom line is you have a number of people, these individuals who call themselves independents. I just believe that most of them, they're in their feelings. These are the ones who really don't know what's going on out there. They don't know who to vote for. But we have to cater to them. These are the individuals that you can be independent and still vote for a party. You look at Bernie Sanders. He's an independent, but he still votes with the Democrats. Bottom line is, these so-called independents out there, they're not really independents. They want entitlements. These are the ones that they'll claim that they're independent, but they're really Democrats. So you have a mindset of a number of people in this country. They want government to intervene. That's what they want. In life, you'll never make everything fair. That's not how it works. And when you hear all the misinformation and disinformation about what's going on, these are people out here who don't read. These are your low information voters. These are the ones, just like I was telling you about the education. A lot of these individuals don't read. They don't listen. They hear some, like I'm going back to what the Department of Education said. They didn't devalue these degrees. They just placed caps for loan amounts. And nobody's really taken a statistic of how many architects, how many nurses, how many public health officials actually go to graduate school. Nobody has. How many of those individuals get doctorate? I guarantee there's not a lot. Why? Because as a nursing student or architecture student, you don't need a doctorate degree unless you're going to be an academic. Bottom line is, you have too many people who aren't telling the truth out here. And because they don't tell the truth, they use a lot of fear mongering. That's what Jasmine Crockett uses. That's what all the Democrats use it the most. And really, all you have in this country is hate Trump. That's what's going to happen in the midterms. Trump isn't even on the ballot. But because Trump is president, they're going to vote for something to impede Trump. This is why I'm telling all the Republican voters out there, don't sit home. See, the Democrats, one thing about them, they stick together. Even if their shit doesn't make sense, they will get out there because they're angry. They're angry because their socialist policies aren't in this administration. We've dealt with enough wokeism. We had enough of the Democrats trying to bully everybody else to believe what they believe in. And the Democrats try to use that reverse psychology by calling Trump fascist, when in essence, these are the ones who are anarchists, authoritarian. If we don't believe what they want us to believe in, they'll cancel us. They'll kill us. That's how they think. But you have a number of individuals out here who don't understand that because they are caught up in the lies and the malicious attacks. The problem is, today we have too much of an entitlement and immature society. less knowledgeable. They really don't know how the world works. And they vote with emotion. You know, most of these individuals look at things as high, but they don't have a strategy to find deals in grocery stores. Heck, many of them don't even read the ingredients on food. But they do complain that things are too high. Are things high? Sure, they're high. But you have to know how to buy. I mean, if Kamala Harris were president, what would this country be like? Probably more immigration. But see, a lot of things that Trump is talking about wouldn't be said because the Democrats would be happy because this is what they want. They want everything their way. Democrats don't understand how the real world works. And you have some Republicans out there as well. And Republicans during these special elections, during these off-year elections, see, the Republicans get too damn complacent when it comes to midterms and off-year elections. Well, the Democrats are voting out of anger. So if the Democrats are rushing more people to the polls than the Republicans, then you're going to get that socialist put in office that you don't want. Like in Tennessee, deep ruby red state. And I want to see the outcome of this special election. And this is why I don't want women running in government. A lot of these women are way too liberal. That's why women shouldn't be leading anything. Can't trust them. Most women. Because you have a lot of women. And the funny thing about it is, there's a lot of white women, liberal white women. And see, these liberals act like they care about you if you're black. They don't care about you. They're using you. Like the white women, here's the thing. When black women were actually cooking and breastfeeding white babies, white women weren't doing anything. They couldn't cook. That's why they can't cook now. Black women were doing all the cooking for them. And see, really what the white woman, and I'm just going to say this, particularly the ones who are from the city and suburbs, white women are lazy. You know, they benefited under the patriarchy, but they don't want the patriarchy, but they do want the patriarchy. Doesn't make sense what I just said. So let me clarify. They benefit under the patriarchy, but they don't want the patriarchy. You see, under hypergamy, for the women by women, they have to understand this. You're going to have to make sacrifices. And see, when you're running government, it's like that woman, I forgot her name. She was asked questions about the police, about defunding the police. The one in Tennessee running that special house election couldn't answer a question. Said, well, I was a private citizen. They did, so what? Did you not say you were a state legislator? Bottom line is you have a number of people who don't know what the hell is going on out here. They don't care what's going on. They live in a cardboard box. They live in their feelings. And unfortunately, living in their feelings, it doesn't produce any critical thinking. And you have men like that. And what's happening is they're bringing in the, I call it the undesirables. There's a lot of your low information voters, they're your undesirables. They have nothing to offer this country, or they don't want to offer this country anything. They don't want to compete. They haven't, number one, they're immature, but they're thinking, they believe that somebody owes them something. Well, somebody's not going to give you everything that you want. That's not how the real world works. But they believe somebody owes them something. And in the end, they don't make out. It's just like going over this education. I have to reiterate that again. People don't ask enough questions. This is why I brought that Department of Education information up to you. Because your degrees are not being devalued as professional. They're not being listed as professional for federal loan borrowing limits. And heck, when you are going to school and you can borrow $20,500, first of all, if there's a school out there where you have to borrow that much money, I would find another school. They have plenty of schools cheaper. Now, I know some of the parents encourage their children to go off to school. Well, that's good, but sometimes you have to stay close to home, especially if they're paying for it. And right now, I've been to college, and I'm just going to tell you this: college is a racket. It's always been a racket since the 90s. The 80s, college was a little lower because you didn't have as many people going, but you have more people borrowing. And of course, I don't expect somebody who's young to go get a job like that, because the job that they get is not going to be enough to pay for college. Now, one thing that some of the youngins can do, their parents would have them, no, I'm not for grown kids living at home, but if they're going to college, other ways they can go to the military, they can get college credits through the military, which that'll save them some money. They can go to a community college. I mean, there are different ideas. I mean, I know how to borrow money, still paying it back, almost finished paying it back. But I've been paying as I go along. But you have other people out there who aren't paying. That's the problem. And because they're not paying, they go into default. And again, when it comes to a lot of these individuals, this is where you get the dummies too. We had high prices. We had a lot of immorality, but yet you have people that want to go right back into it. That's a lot of people or your so-called independence. This is why I have to say individuals need to get better. What's going on? Get better. A lot of people don't have a clue to what's going on, and they never will have a clue. And when I brought you this information tonight, particularly on the education, right now this country has no understanding of how it works. Certainly, is everything fair in this country? No. And I just believe that we have promoted a society of, in my humble opinion, entitlement, immaturity. And in the end, the American dream, to be honest with you, is never going to be for everybody. Now, yes, is there still racism, prejudice out here? Absolutely. Not saying that. I mean, you could be black and have degrees and still not get a job. But what I would be is more resourceful. That's the thing. When it comes to us, many of us are not very resourceful people. We have a lot of individuals that aren't resourceful. They call themselves reading to try to prove an argument because they're reading material based on what they believe in, thinking that they're right. When people go out to vote, candidate will say something that sounds good, but can they put it through? And then you have to realize some of these individuals who are coming in the House and Senate, yes, you want to be the majority party because you're going to have most of the say because you're going to have more of the committees. See, the House, you get a lot of committee assignments. But when you come in, you're at the low level in the totem pole, it's not going to be like that for you. It's never going to be like that for you. It has never been like that for you. You have too many individuals who don't understand that. There are people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. See, all these individuals talk about MAGA, they were never MAGA. They acted as if they were MAGA. They were never MAGA. These individuals were undercover leftists. You know, you have to beware some of these so-called conservative women too, like Tommy Lahren. Can't trust them. Specifically, some of these so-called educated white women. Can't trust them. I have to say, living in this country, you have a lot of people, and even some of the people in my generation, they don't know anything about politics. They don't. Some people right here on the internet, they have an opinion. I read into it every day. And, you know, when it comes to voting, you should not just vote for the people who are in the federal government. You need to vote for people who are in the state government. You need to, and I did this a while back. I showed you what a ballot looks like. You should understand ballot initiatives. And see, one of the issues is we have a public school system that doesn't teach civics anymore. And what it is, you have individuals, it's not that they don't understand the real world. They're not ready for the real world because they haven't taught how the real world works. They ask the wrong questions. And when everything is engulfed in delusion, feelings, or better yet, what I've always presented to you, the lead, the lies, the emotions, the assumptions, the delusion, deceit, deception, and disease, that's when you get hung up in everything. It's when you become a believer of anything. This is when you have individuals who don't do their own research. And you don't have to be a genius, but you should know who you're voting for and why you're voting for that person. You don't vote for somebody because they're a woman or they're black. I know a number of blacks, they will vote for black regardless of how that black sounds because they're black. Symbolism. Look at Chicago. Look at all these cities out there. That's what happens. And we go to the well once too often, you end up drowning in the well. Now, like I said, I want to see the results of this special election with this individual. And this individual said she hated Nashville. So I would run that ad if I were in Tennessee for this woman to knock her out. If you're going to use media, use it effectively. I know somebody here in Indiana said that kind of shit. I'm talking about it all over YouTube. I'm talking about it wherever I go. Let some leftist come out with some bullshit that woman came out. I hate Indianapolis. Oh, you do? And you live here too? I mean, I'm hoping, God forbid, that Andre Carson, he's a Democrat, one of the congressmen in Marion County. Let him come out with, I want to defund the police. I hate Indiana. See how fast his political career goes up in smoke. And you know, another thing, a number of people don't even know who their Congress people are. And see, these leftists, what they're doing, I will, you know, even though you have some Republicans and a number of them are weak, I will say this about the Republicans. The Republicans will go on CNN and all the liberal networks, but you don't see these leftists coming on a Newsmax or any right wing networks. You don't see it because they're scared. I know I heard Joy Behar say, oh, they're scared. No, they're not scared. They know you don't make a bunch of sense. And I guarantee if they came on your channel, Joy Behar, you'd sit there and be quiet. And that's the thing about the left. They don't really have anything. The left's whole purpose is to destroy this agenda. I mean, with gas prices, you have some of the left, they're upset that gas prices are going down. Because, see, the left wants us to be poor because they want us to depend on the government. That's the problem. And when people are on the left doesn't make any sense at all. But you have dumb people out there who will vote for people who want to hurt this country, thinking that they're going to get a better deal through redistribution. Redistribution doesn't mean growth. Why? Because it doesn't encourage growth. In fact, things could still be higher. Things are never going to be fair here. Here's my feeling. We talk about immigration. All you people who are against immigration, why don't you go with the illegal immigrants back to their country? Why don't you go with them? Why don't you run that same game in their countries as they're running here? See what would happen. Because one thing I will say, many of these individuals, they don't like Americans anyway. They don't. But see what happens if they go in there, if Americans go into their countries. It's going to be some problems. And the bottom line, what I'm trying to tell you all is stop listening to the misinformation and the disinformation. Because in the end, all it's going to do is get you to be very gullible, and you're going to vote for something that's going to tear down this country. And see, that's the problem. The people who are voting these socialists and these communists in, you're at fault when you put them in. Because, see, you have a number of people who are unproductive in this country. And they want a welfare state. Welfare state is not going to win. You look at a number of these socialist and communist countries, they don't work. You look at under communism, people like Genghis Khan, Pol Pot, Stalin. I would say Mussolini, but Mussolini was a fascist. But even fascism is bad. But bottom line, just have to say this to people, particularly you Republicans. Whenever there's a special election, you got to get out there to vote. Stop being lazy. I know Trump's not on the ticket, but for the midterms, I'm just going to say this. You're going to have a lot of angry Democrats. And that's all the Democrats are voting for. They're voting on anger. Generally, the party that's out of power is going to do that. Republicans have a real good chance of keeping the Democrats out of power for a while. But the bottom line is you got too many stupid people who are listening to the junk on television, the bullshit on television, that oh, well, Trump said he was going to do it. First of all, there's so much a president can do. He's got to go through Congress. The president can have all the ideas and the agenda, but it takes Congress to push his agenda. And because everything is so partisan out here, the Republicans have a slim margin in the House. They need more House members. They need people who are going to vote his agenda. And bottom line, like I said, we have too many people who are ignorant. They're ignorant of what's a profession, and you even have professionals. Oh, well, we're going to work to keep accounting and architecture as a profession. They are professions. Again, like I said, the U.S. Department of Education is just capping what you can get. That's all. Not going to hurt at all. And in the end, it's going to bring down tuition. Because when certain degrees are borrowing so much money, degrees that aren't even part of that, like engineering, raises the cost to go to school to be an engineer as well, because they're all getting the same financial aid money. Bottom line, in college, if we reduce the amount of financial aid, now if you're an older student going to school, nobody's saying this. Use a payment plan. That's what I use. If you have tuition and you're an older student, I'm not talking about a younger student, but an older student, and you're making $70,000, $80,000 a year, and you don't have a lot of bills, use the payment plan. You can pay for college as $3,000. Just pay $750 every month. That's what I've done. It works every time. Bottom line is this: you have to know what you're voting for. That's it. You got to know your value. And then when it comes to this education, you got to know when it comes to what is a profession. Is it being defined by value, or is it being defined by loan amount you can borrow? And when it comes to voting, do we have a lot of individuals who are low information voters? I believe we do. But in the long run, you have to ask yourself this: what kind of country do you want? Do you want a country that, because first of all, the elitists aren't going to look out for you anyway. We're all going to be proletariats when we're out of power. But do you want authoritarianism? Or do you want some freedom in this country? It's like I said, you have individuals out here saying Trump thinks he's a king. Well, if Trump was a king, you couldn't protest. Trump didn't say you couldn't protest. It's just that you don't like the policies. You don't agree with what he's saying. So all the contradictions come out, and I exposed them. Just like I exposed them tonight when it came to the education. My question is, do you want information, or do you want disinformation? Because in the end, the truth always prevails. Why? Because people who are seeking truth will understand that truth can be painful, but it's still the truth. Lies are all fairy tales. They make you feel good, but in the end, lies just to cover up for the reality, for the truth. People who lie don't want to see the truth, because if they see the truth, they're going to be exposed for who they are. But in the end, I will always settle for truth. Why? Because truth will always set me free, whether I agree with it or not. always stand up for the truth. Because in the end, the truth is always going to be the victor. Lies are for losers. That's why I came up with lead was the first letter, L for lies. Always seek truth. You'll be better off. And that's my commentary for this edition of the 401 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube. If you like what I just presented, please comment, share, and subscribe. And if you're looking for some STEM content, check out my other channel, the CIS channel. On that channel, you get a daily dose of science, technology, engineering, and math. Now, here's where you can find me. 401 Talk Zone radio show. You can find me right here. YouTube, X formerly Twitter, Rumble, and Truth Social. And for the QCIS channel, you can also find me right here on YouTube, X formerly Twitter, and LinkedIn. And for what I spoke tonight, I'm not offending anybody, but if you are taking it as being offended, that means you need to change, because it is a button that I push and you're part of the problem regarding the truth that I've exposed with all of this misinformation that is being given out. And you might be the one giving out misinformation. And the offense is using your disinformation to try to shame individuals. And also, we have jealous people. We're not equal. Yes, I do believe we need an opportunity. But in the end, life isn't fair. So I don't worry about what the next person has. And you shouldn't either. This is why I always say, be blessed for what you have. Don't worry about what you don't have. But know that the sun always rises in the east, sets in the west. Doesn't apply, let it fly. But if the shoe fits, wear it. If you don't like the shoe, just change it. Use common sense. Once again, thank you for listening to this edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube. Till next time, my name is Leon Jones. I want you all to have a wonderful and gracious evening. God bless you. I'm out.